big story this evening, the lead story that we're talking about. Now we know EVs are the new buzz. Everybody is looking at the possibility of buying an electric vehicle. It's something that is being promoted by the government as well. And the reason is because it is supposed to be the future. ICE engines are supposed to be the past. And this will be a greener alternative. We've also seen the explosion of, and no pun intended, of the number of EVs in two-wheelers that are now available across the country. But two incidents that have taken place on Saturday have raised some serious questions. The first one in Pune, where a parked Ola e-scooter went up in flames, and a second one in Vellore, where a company called Okinawa's scooter again went up in flames. And in the second case, this actually led to the death of a man and his 13-year-old daughter. Now, the question we're asking today is, what are the checks and balances to be put in place so that a relatively new technology that is the future is not hampered by doubts that will clearly be raised in the minds of customers? Why would this have happened? We're trying to understand what's going on. Hormazd Sorabjee, editor, Autocar India, is joining us for this. Sohinder Singh Gill, CEO, Ola Electric India, is with us on the show. Rajeev Singh, partner and Automotive Leader, Deloitte, is joining us. And I'm also speaking with Arun, Sreyas, founder, Racemergy. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Mr. Gill, let me just begin with you explaining to us how something like this may have taken place.
Well, the reasons can be many. It starts with the cell, which can be faulty during manufacturing of cell, to assembling of battery, to a BMS which is not properly designed, to an OEM who has not tested the product well for over a long period of time. And lastly, to a certain extent, but not too major, is the customer who may have not taken enough precautions to see that the batteries which was sort of behaving like this way was not taken for servicing, or some sort of a sparks which are happening externally, but those are the tail ends.
So now, Mr. Gill, clearly these could be completely unrelated incidents. They could be coincidental. We are still waiting for investigations to be complete to understand what happened in these individual cases. But it will raise some questions in the mind of consumers who are keen to switch to EV for many reasons, including how expensive petrol and diesel is becoming. What would you say to them? How can people ensure that what they're buying is safe?
See, on one end, this is unfortunate, especially the loss of life and property. So the least that could have been done is make it so safe, at least, that the fire doesn't get propagated to take even the toll of life and property. So one has to give confidence to the customer from that point of view. Fires do happen. Fires have been happening in IC engines, even in the Boeing aircraft, and so many other things. But are they rare, or are they frequent occurring events? One has to see that. So this what has happened in the recent past could forbid a type of a caution on the type of designs, type of cells, type of manufacturing that we are doing. So the confidence has to come back on the way forward of mainly the good OEMs to assure the customers that their designs are fail-safe, they have taken enough precautions, the brand, what they are talking in the market, the products they are giving is up to that mark, and after sale also, they are in touch with the customers to see that the usual telltale signs of the battery, which is going to explode or take fire after a few months, is arrested well in time whenever the scooter comes to service. So it's a comprehensive action, right from sourcing to customer education. And this is, I think, a lesson now that OEMs have to really increase their efforts in giving that confidence to customer that these are really stray and rare incidents, and they will not be repeated. At least it will not be propagated to the extent that there is so much of a damage of life and property.
Absolutely. Just one more follow-up, Mr. Gill, before I broaden the debate. Because what we're trying to understand is that are there specific factors that could worsen the situation? For example, India's summer heat. Are there things like that, or overcharging the battery? Are there a multiple number of factors that could lead to something like this happening?
Oh yes, other than a defect in the cell, when it is made in an environment where there is a dust particle which goes into a cell and creates a hot spot, those are manufacturing evils. But when it comes to the India-specific situation, there is so much that India has which can create extra pressure onto the batteries. You have said it right. It is temperature, humidity, even the road conditions creating vibrations, which are much more than the normal ones, and the overriding conditions of burden, putting more load onto the scooter, to the extent of small things like you are driving a scooter in the sun, you come back and suddenly start charging it, the battery starts boiling. So the myriad reasons, and one has to, as an OEM, one has to educate or otherwise take care of everything in the link from starting point of a customer education to see to it the right sourcing is done, that these batteries are not only safe, but they remain safe towards the end of life.
Absolutely. Hormazd, let me bring you into this debate. And here is the question. It's twofold. One is that are enough checks and balances being put into place as more and more OEMs of different size and stature are rolling out their products? And number two, who's looking out to ensure that people buying this realize all of these things?
Well, look, I think fundamentally this is an issue of two things. One is obviously a validation. I think some manufacturers, in their rush to get the products out, haven't validated it enough. I think Indian summers are absolutely brutal. Heat is a big enemy of batteries. They cause a lot of thermal issues. The battery management system, the thermal management system, they all have to be beefed up to that extent to make sure that, basically that the heat dissipation is faster than the heat buildup. That's really what leads to the fires finally. You've got to dissipate the heat the battery builds up as quickly as possible to kind of, to keep it safe. So I think, at the end of the day, I think every OEM, every manufacturer has a certain protocol of safety, which they should adhere to or they need to adhere to. As Mr. Gill said, there are other issues also. You have even one faulty cell, which is obviously comes from the cell manufacturer. Even a dust particle or something. The main thing is if there's a short circuit inside the cell, it leads to a fire and then it spreads from one cell to another. So I think, we need to also maybe look at technologies which are more practical for India. They may not be as good in terms of performance, but if you want to play safe, you could use certain cells like cylindrical cells, which don't have the same energy density, but because there's space between the cylinders, the heat dissipation is a lot better. A good example is the Tata Nexon EV. They use very basic cylindrical LFP cells. I think you don't get the absolute energy density or the performance, but at least in terms of heat dissipation, thermal management, they are easier to deal with. That's not to say that, the other technologies can't be dealt with, but there are obviously more challenges in that aspect. Then there's more cost, there's more complexity and that sort of thing. So this is how, this is the whole thing about vehicles today, whether it's electric or IC engine, there's always a trade-off. You're pushing for more performance, you're pushing for more energy density, that sort of thing. That comes at a certain cost and certain complications which come into it. So I think, net, I would say that Indian summers, they are very brutal. It's something. But
Hormazd, if I can just ask, Indian summers being brutal is not news to anyone.
Correct.
You talked about ICE engines and that whole trade-off between cost and other performance, etc. They are guided and, they come under the constraints of very strict parameters that central government agencies lay down. Is it different for EVs? Because, no, everyone knows Indian summers are going to be brutal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, when you design a car, even an IC car for Indian summers, the cooling capacity has to be of a certain standard. The air conditioning has to be of a certain level. You got to dissipate the heat over there. The cooling, it's all down to cooling. It's how you cool the whole system, which has to be measured. I don't think it's, honestly, it's not rocket science. It's just you can calculate this on a computer, what needs to be done in terms of really, the thermal management and the BMS and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, validation is very, very important. I think sometimes not enough validation is done. You don't get enough data in various parts of the country as to how the vehicles or batteries or whatever performs. And when you rush through things, you do have issues like this.
Yep. Arun, I'd like you to weigh in on the debate that we're having right now. And let's start from, why do you think something like this could have happened? It was one incident. Now we know that it's two. And they could be completely unrelated. We don't know yet. But the fact is, something similar has happened in a similar product category in one day. And it's a space which has huge interest in it. What do you think the implications of this are?
Most likely related to a thermal runaway issue. And I think most of the reasons for such an incident have already been covered in the previous answers. But I think one important thing is that these incidents are something that, cannot just happen at the time of manufacturing itself, can happen over a period of time. So let's say you have got like 1 year or 2 years of life that's been, the battery's been driven, and then the characteristics of the cell kind of behave differently across the time. Like over time, they kind of change. They behave different from each other. So and can also be one of the reasons why it can lead to a thermal runaway issue. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because when you're validating a certain particular battery or a certain vehicle, these things are meant to last for a few years, and if not like a decade itself, right? And so when you're trying to validate it, you have to give it enough time. No matter how accelerated you can do the testing, this incident can happen in your 5th year or in your 7th year. A customer buys a vehicle for them to use it for quite some time, quite a few years, right? So you have to ensure that the testing cycles are in a way that even if you accelerate the whole time cycle to kind of test during this entire 7 to 10 years, you want to ensure that you give it enough time to test it out, no matter how much acceleration you do it, but not to kind of squeeze it in a few months, because that's almost impossible to do it. And these issues, as I said, can arise any point of time in its life. So if you don't give enough time, and these incidents are bound to happen. The implications, I would say,
I'm just going to ask you to underline exactly what you're saying. Are you saying that there's a possibility not enough time was given for testing?
Absolutely.
Which is why this may have happened? Because, I mean, I know you want to perhaps, be a little subtle about what you're trying to say, but it's an important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, it is like, say, if you've got a car which you expect it to run for 10 years, and if you've got a product development cycle of like 2 years, you have to. There are methods and mechanisms through simulations, as people have mentioned, that you can actually accelerate this life cycle testing and ensure that you can somewhat simulate this kind of performance. But you cannot just bring down a 10-year life cycle to a few months. It's almost impossible to do that. You'd have to give it some time, at least a couple of years, to 2 to 3 years. And that's the reason why a lot of EV companies take good enough time to roll out their product, right? I mean, from the time when it was born till the time of its launch, it takes a good 4 to 5 years to roll out this product. It's not that they're not developing or anything, but you have to go through this entire validation cycle. And if you skip that, you don't know what's going to happen with the battery pack. It's just like a blind, road that you're taking, and it can lead to anything. And especially these kind of thermal runaway issues can happen because of this.
Yeah. Rajeev Singh, how do you see this entire issue panning out? I mean, we already have reports about the central government sending, teams of investigators to check out these two incidents and figure out what has happened. But isn't there a process in place initially? Is there any authority which assesses the safety of these vehicles before they're being rolled out?
No, you are right, Tamanna. There is an authority, but I'm just going to add to a few points to the discussion and come to the question that you asked, Tamanna. So what we should also keep in mind, Tamanna, is that a lot of vehicles, for example, especially EV vehicles, you are seeing a lot of research, a lot of new technology, a lot of new vehicles which are getting manufactured probably in colder zones, in countries in Europe, in countries in Japan, or in countries like Japan, China, and so on. These are all countries which are beyond 23.5 degrees north or kind of a thing, which are colder climates. Now, whatever testing may have been done, say, from a perspective of not just the battery, but the overall vehicle, I think we need to keep in mind that the place where these vehicles are getting used is having a very, very different environment. And hence, there has to be a little stricter testing norm, I would say. We did have norms, Tamanna, in the past as well, but some of these norms were more focused in terms of battery testing, which is testing the battery, testing the cells from electric, mechanical perspective, and so on. But I think that even the government is slightly broadening this testing norms. We are moving to a new norm from a testing perspective, which is going to test not only the battery and the cell, but the entire ecosystem. Because what is very important, as Hormazd said, is that apart from the battery and the cell, say for example, there is an element called BMS, which is battery management system. Now that is the brain of the battery, because it helps in terms of ensuring right performance of the battery. It ensures that the battery is not getting overcharged. It disconnects whenever it is overcharging. Whenever it finds that the battery temperature is going beyond a particular point, it tends to disconnect and so on. Now it is important that we test the entire ecosystem and not just the battery and the cells. I think the new testing norms, which we did hear from the government, from MORF, I think these testing norms are aligned to the EU standards. And are a little more broader. So I think that should go a longer way in terms of building a higher confidence in terms of getting safer vehicles. But I think at the same time, what we need to be also equally conscious about the fact is that a discipline in terms of implementing these norms. The simple reason, Tamanna, is because say vehicles which are below 25 kilometers, which run say at a speed below 25 kilometers an hour. Now, those vehicles need not be registered, say, for example, with the RTO. We just need to have a good check out there to ensure that any vehicle which is coming on the road, even if it is at a slow speed of below 25 kilometers an hour, still is going through all the testings and all the approval processes so that we don't find any such incidences happening. These are very, very unfortunate incidences, and they hamper or they do far more bad to the entire cause rather than helping in terms of EV penetration in the country.
Absolutely. And look at this sorrowful situation. A 13-year-old girl has lost her life. The statement from the company concerned also talks about how they may have charged incorrectly. I mean, that's a heavy price to pay for possibly charging incorrectly. Were these people told how to do it or how not to do it? All of these questions now arise. Mr. Gill, I'd like you to come in as, you know, one of the leading players really in this space. What do customers today do? I mean, till all of these new norms are stringent, there are so many players in the market. Customer looks perhaps for the cheapest deal or, you know, is price sensitive. What about those vehicles which are out there today? Do we need to ensure that all of them are safe as well? How do we ensure that these customers know what's going on?
So I would divide the customers into two. Some of them are technically savvy and they understand like which chemistry, like Sorabjee was saying, is safer, what type of BMS is there. And so technically they go into the product and they're able to discern that this product or this battery would perform safer than the other one. So I'm leaving aside those, perhaps they can take a wise decision, but majority of customers who walk in, we don't know anything about the batteries. That is where the brands count. The brands have the accountability and responsibility of educating the battery part of the whole product, how susceptible it is, how to take care of it, what is their role, what happens if, unfortunately, if there's a fire, how to deal with it. All these are the aspects which are sort of information which is factual and shared very properly at the time of sale will give a lot of confidence to the customer. Also, from the customer point of view, it means that they have to somewhere go to standard products which have good certification and good track records of good safety also. So from that point of view, there is a clear indicator that you can't have an automobile created by a set of small fly-by-night operators and try to make business out of it. So brands would respect perhaps their own sort of status to make sure that these batteries that they give to the customers are safer. So I would say that is one way of looking at it. But understand this part of it now, let's clearly. On technology front, it is possible even today that some of the batteries, even if they're well certified, some of them may fall out of manufacturing process and start misbehaving like people are saying after 4 or 5 years. Is there a mechanism technologically available, which is very much available through some startups I have seen, which can create alarms as soon as the battery starts misbehaving of a degree 1, 2, or 3, that here it is. This is early enough, please take it to the dealer. Or it has become dangerous now. Please do take care of the battery, don't touch it. So those abnormalities can be dealt with at least on the side of if the battery has started misbehaving. That is the least manufacturers can do other than trying to create safer batteries sharing correct information, making sure the products are brought back to service where dealer checks it off and on, because any battery that is going to have fire after 3 months gives some telltale signs of it much before in advance, in bulging, in de-shaping, in abnormal heat, and so many other things. So if it is brought in time, if it is ensured by network that the batteries are constantly monitored, at least that part is taken care of. Till the time we have a much safer technology, much safer chemistries, which is perhaps a little away, we can reduce the events to rarest of rare. And in case of those unfortunate incidents, make sure that they are not propagated like a bomb or an explosion, which creates a havoc.
Absolutely. Hormazd, would this be as much of a danger? We talked about batteries misbehaving, Indian weather conditions, etc., in four-wheelers as in two-wheelers. Would it be the same amount of risk?
Yeah, I mean, the principles are the same. The chemistries are the same. In fact, if at all, it would be a bigger risk because the batteries are bigger. The fires can be more dangerous, more intense. And unlike a two-wheeler, you can't jump off. So yes, there are cases of Teslas catching fire. So it happens even to the most well-known EV car maker in the world as well. So I think absolutely. I mean, it's all down finally to the chemistry, the way the cells are done, where the packs are done. That's all important. And as Mr. Gill said, there are. You've got to manage the batteries. You've really got to, treat batteries with kid gloves in terms of, because batteries operate in a very small operating margin optimally. They don't like it too cold. They don't like it too hot. So you really got to keep the battery within a certain operating temperature range for them to perform very well. But there is technology to do that. But what I'd also like to add is, that I think what the worry is that with these incidents, the entire EV industry will be painted with the same brush or fire extinguisher in this case. But there are EV makers and there are EV makers. And, I'll just put it right out there, the elephant in the room, which is Ola and the way they've been managing this. I mean, just to let you know, I've just taken delivery of my Ola today, the S1 Pro. So I just today itself, fantastic bike. It's definitely the best performing bike, but you hear of a lot of glitches. You hear of a lot of issues. And unfortunately, that stems from probably a culture of speed and getting it out in the market, sometimes at the expense of quality. So, I think each brand, has to ensure that what builds a brand finally is the quality, is the trust of the customer, and not just getting it out into the market as quickly as possible.
No, but is the onus only on the brand? I think there is a point where we need to underline a vehicle is not like any other product out there. Like a mobile phone.
That's why the onus is on the brand, because it's the brands which make sure that.
But it's also, isn't it also on central agencies which allow this? I mean, a vehicle needs to have more stringent measures because it can harm a lot more people around
They do have the measures, but you can't be checking each and every vehicle to make sure that those measures are followed, can you? So, I mean, everyone has a standard, everyone has a thing, but now, you've got to make sure that they are there to just practically not possible for an agency to check each and every bike that comes off the assembly line. It's just not possible or practical anywhere in the world to do it. So that's really not the answer. The answer really is for manufacturers themselves to realize that this is a new technology. They have to build the trust of the customer. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, EVs are the way forward. We all know it. And I enjoy riding an EV, especially in the city. That apart from being pollution free, they're effortless to drive, they're low torque, absolutely wonderful. It's actually addictive. And, there's a good thing going, and the early movers really have a huge advantage and shouldn't squander it away by trying to be even faster and, not making sure that the technology is absolutely robust and reliable. And I think that's really the point, that everyone has to work on. Just don't be too hasty on this. Batteries is a new black art, so to speak. It's all about the chemistry more than anything else. And that really is developing very, very fast. People are looking at new technologies, whether it's solid state, whether it's sodium. They each have their own challenges. Biggest of them being the thermal issues, which everyone is trying to, control and manage. You've got NMCs again, which compared to LFPs, that by nature are a little, let's say need a better thermal management. So all this is there. It's just a question of, making sure that you tighten your standards and make sure that, you meet them, because the standards are there. And, these are at the end of the day, yes, it's common, but they are still stray incidents. It's not that everything is catching fire.
Yeah.
Technology does work.
Technology does work, but the point is the two-wheeler is the vehicle of the common Indian who may not be, and mostly is not tech savvy, may not be very educated either, and is just looking for a cheap and safe mode of transport to get around. If we're offering new technology which saves the environment, saves on petrol, diesel prices, then I think the onus is definitely on the companies to make sure that this new space is not soured by this fear. We'll watch the space and see what action comes up next. But I will end this here. I want to thank all of you for joining us on this discussion this evening.
Thank you.